Hey, Shye. Thanks for joining me today for this customer discovery interview. Excited to ask you a few questions to learn a little bit about your perspective for a new business idea I'm working on. And I'll share more at the end about what the actual project is. But just to kind of set expectations, I'm trying to learn more about the pain points that growth stage companies have to see what opportunities there might be to serve them. And I'm going to define growth stage as a company that has at least 5 employees. It's not just a founder or a couple of co-founders, and a company that has a product in the market. So they're generating revenue, ideally at least a couple $100,000, and looking to kind of grow and scale their business. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Cool. So based on your experience, what are some of the pain points you've seen growth stage companies deal with?
Wow. There's many. Um, I think that probably the ones that come to top of mind would be um, managing cash flow uh, and generally speaking, measuring progress. Because it can be very chaotic and trying to understand where to focus and how to measure, progress on things that matter is a pain
Yep.
point. And then I would say maybe another one that's, these are like maybe the top three, I guess, would be learning how to effectively communicate and lead when your team expands beyond a handful of people, right? So, when you're a small group, you're working together as a team, you see each other. Mike says, "Hey, I'm going to see my mom's. I'm going to my mom's on Thursday. I'll see you guys later." Everybody's like, "Oh, cool, no problem. I'll cover for you. I'll do this and that." But
Yep.
when you get, as soon as you start to go above five, usually towards 10, all of a sudden, despite your best wishes, you need to have a little more structure, and there's different ways of going about that. But I think that that's a real messy pain point, and the leadership gaps also start showing up. So bad behaviors that people have, sort of the darker sides of our personalities or skill gaps that we have, they really start showing up there a lot. And if we haven't been taught, it's hard to understand that and deal with it.
Yeah, and I'm curious on the kind of as the team expands side, what are the different roles that you've seen companies hire for as they're growing from 5 to 10 or 15 folks?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I see people hire, certainly people to help with sales, depending on the kind of product that they have, right? If it's
Yep.
often if it's not as much if it's direct to consumer, and they
Mhm.
already have a pretty good channel for that. So if they feel like they're reaching consumers the way they want to reach them, if it's a tech product and they're online and they're able to reach consumers in through some of those channels, um, and not quite as much. But certainly if it requires business development, if it's in B2B firms where they have to go out and talk to people, there it seems like they try to hire people to help them create and leverage relationships,
Yep.
because we know how complex that can be, right? And then hopefully speed up the sales process. And they definitely, ironically, need a lot of help in sort of boring foundational company building stuff, which is frustrating because when you really think about it, even in those growth stages, you have some signs of product market fit, but you might not have really completely figured that out to the extent that one ever completely figures that out, right? So I think like you need help though with bookkeeping. That becomes an issue, especially if they've just been sort of winging it up till then. You need administrative help. You need someone to help manage calendars and activities, and so sometimes they'll do that. I mean, I certainly advise folks to try to do that in incorporating virtual assistants and others to at least get that going. Um, and sometimes, again, depending on the nature of the beast, they will hire someone to manage operations, right? So if it's I don't know, more of a bricks and mortar type shop where there's a retail presence, and maybe
Yep.
the founders are doing everything. Um, the founders sometimes get trapped in that, and they need to be able to think more strategically. So they, working 12-hour days every day, making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing is only so sustainable. So it's a lot of different pieces, but that's what I've observed.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And as folks are thinking about human resources and how they can, talking about the founder who's working 12 plus hours every day, that's not sustainable. They're going to burn out. Um, have you seen instances where companies need to hire like an outside contractor, maybe for 10 or 15 hours a week before they're ready to hire a full-time employee? Have you seen that work well
Sure. I
or?
mean, I've seen that strategy. Absolutely. I think we're seeing more of those strategies now more than ever because of the gig economy and the ability to hire very effective people in incremental ways. I think more teams are trying those kinds of models, and and I
And
think
what
it can
like
be
Shye,
different.
what business function or like what types of problems
So
have you seen them
what
hire
I've
for?
seen work really well is legal, uh, CFO, external CFO, like cash management, strategy,
Yep.
um, and marketing for sure. Um,
What types of marketing activities?
so, a lot of social media marketing management because, again, unless you're an absolute expert, it is incredibly time consuming. I'm not just talking about taking pictures and posting them, right? I'm talking about measuring performance, understanding what's working, figuring out what to do next. Channel testing is, it's hugely important, and it takes a while to develop that expertise, and not everybody has that out of the gate. So I think that that's an area. Um, even mature companies are doing that now because they want digital natives working on that stuff and people that are really competent at managing those systems. And it takes a lot to learn and train in house.
Yep. Any other marketing functions outside of social media
Yeah,
management and?
absolutely. A PR and reputation management firms. Again, I'm sorry, I'm thinking now a little bit more mature. We're talking about growth companies. I certainly think public relations in general can be very important. Copywriting
Yeah, yeah.
works really well for and again, these are things not all of us are great at. So having someone to write your copy, what's on your website, what are you putting in your marketing materials? We're not all great at that, even though we think some of us might think we are. So that works really well for gig work as well, without hiring a full time person to do that.
Yeah. And have you seen any other things? We talked about legal, kind of outsourced CFO, finance stuff, marketing, any
Yep.
other areas for kind of part-time contractors to help them scale up?
I've seen also around customer acquisitions. I've seen outsourced like phone management
Yeah.
and so not just phone sales necessarily, but inbound phone sales, like
Inbound, like that, like the help desk,
yeah,
like,
like a script for
yep,
managing an inbound inquiry, right?
yep.
Not cold calling out. Although some companies do that, I guess it just depends on the circumstances. And I guess another one would be that we touched on before, but just general administration. So hiring a virtual assistant to manage to help founders manage things like email, calendars, and really help just keep them on task. So yeah,
Yeah. Some
those are
level of even like an accountability buddy.
yeah. And what's interesting too, in the in sort of this gig economy, it can be really, really effective because some of those relationships end up becoming long-term relationships, and everybody's happy, because sometimes you're able to tap into someone that has an incredible amount of expertise that you would never be able to afford to hire full time, especially when you're small. So you're getting, sometimes a higher quality product, but it does take work to understand and figure out how to best utilize those people. The best experiences I've seen, regardless of the position, the best outcomes I've seen that I've had in some of my business, but also that I've observed with people I've coached, and
Yeah.
is when the person being hired or the firm being hired on that gig basis uh, has a pretty good idea of what their product is, so that the person doing the hiring, the person hiring is like, gee, I need someone to manage media. Let's say I need someone to manage my
Yeah.
social media. It's really helpful when the person you're hiring says, here's what I do. Here's what this looks like. I have a plan. This is how I implement it. Versus them having to co-create sometimes can be really hard, especially if the person doing the hiring doesn't have enough expertise to do that.
Yep. And so to clarify, when you said, they have a pretty good idea what their product is, their product being the plan and the template for how they're going to manage the social media, not the
Totally.
like
Yeah. So
widget.
social media or how I'm going to be your CFO. Here's what that looks like. Here's my routine. We interface this way. I talk to you 3 times a week. We review these things. I go over these reports. Um, I think that that's because really, if you think about this, Mike, through the lens of jobs to be done,
Yeah.
the job to be done for the founder is not to hire a CFO. The job to be done is to understand financial performance, right? So so they don't care about, they want that outcome. They don't know how to get that outcome. So it's on the expert to help them understand that. And I think that individuals and firms that are working in this space that understand how to do that well, I think will themselves do very well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, thinking about some of these like gig economy or, part-time contractor
Hmm.
work, how do you think the founders or the companies will kind of measure the success of the objectives in bringing those people in? Like trying to think about like what are the
Ooh,
expectations
yeah, good
from the
question.
company and how does the gig worker meet or exceed those expectations?
Boy, that's a really good question, and I think it's one founders really have to ask themselves. And and speaking of which, during the very painful sort of growth stage, that's the area, right? When I talked about measuring performance, they're
Yeah.
trying to understand how to manage their own performance and the people they're hiring, whether they're internal, external, gig, or otherwise. How are they thinking about that? What does success look like in those jobs? So I have advice around that, but and I've seen people struggle with it, so I believe it is a pain. But I don't know that that's helpful for what I'm telling you is for me to tell you what I think about how they might go about doing that. I could if you want, but
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah.
Um, and then for gig workers or consultants, that are engaging with these companies, what are some of the best practices you've seen from people who do it really well? You talked a little bit about like they know what their product is, they have some SOPs and how they
Yeah.
engage.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So to start with that, right? Uh, they have that perspective where they understand how to create value for that company and they're able to explain that. And hopefully they've proceduralized that and have a clear way of communicating it. And then it becomes like other relationships. It's setting clear expectations about what success looks like. And then a rhythm to how we're interacting so we can manage those expectations. And um, and with those kinds of regular check-ins, you're talking. You have a solid agreement around what you want the success to look like at the beginning. So whether that's number of posts per week or again, I'm just riffing now on social
Yeah.
media. Um, the job to be done isn't for you to post a bunch of times a week. The job to be done is for me to get more sales. So we need to distill. What do conversions look like? Are we trying to increase eyeballs? Are we just looking at top of the funnel? Because in some stages you might be, right. So I think just a real clear agreement, um, with a handful of KPIs. We need some kind of mutually agreed upon metrics, not just qualitative. But it doesn't. But it also, I don't think people need to overdo that. I think it needs to be simple because it's hard enough managing people and managing relationships. If you have more than a handful of metrics for each person, it's going to get really messy. But I think
Yep.
companies that do that and can manage expectations, outcomes, and interactions will do very well.
And what's something thinking about generalizing for companies in this stage, who are not necessarily ready to hire full-time employees for 40 hours a week and benefits and the salary.
Hmm.
What are some of the things that they need to accomplish, but they don't have somebody in, a specific role where that's the only thing they do all day, every day?
Um, well, I mean, I don't want to sound too repetitive. I think it's a lot of the things that we've talked about, right?
Yeah.
So on the administrative side, which is the non-value creating side, but it's really still important as you start to grow, you need more of a platform. You need systems, right? Um, you need to document your system so that you can scale, right? If you're not documenting what you do well, if you lose someone or you lose a founder, that competency goes out the door. So you really need to codify your competencies. So that requires documentation. So it's not just you need somebody to be good at it, but you need them to be able to memorialize it. Um, the boring stuff, accounting is really important. Managing cash is really super, super important. So that has to be done regularly. Again, a founder needs to know. They don't need to know every single number every single day, but they just need to know what their run rate is and what the trend is, right? And how are we doing? Um, Also, what's hard is if they're trying to raise money during that time, they need to also, it's like, I'm trying to get customers, but I'm trying to raise money, plus I'm trying to run this team that I have, right? Uh, so they might have to dedicate more time to that. And I don't know if that's something that when we think about activities that we can outsource or not, founders need to be involved in fundraising. You can't really outsource that. You can get someone to
Absolutely.
help you, give you advice and feedback and coach you, but they need to do that. And so if they can have somebody help with the day-to-day operations, and even if it is, you know, uh, serving customers for that matter, depending on how involved they still are with the actual service that's being provided, um, they need help with that and managing and starting to build that next layer of management that can manage a team.
Yeah, that sounds great, Shye. And I really appreciate your time today. And, um, if it's all right with you, I'd love to stay in touch as I continue to build this and, get feedback along the way.
Sure.
Um, and are there, before I kind of give you the big reveal and tell you what the business is, are there any companies or folks in your network leading growth stage businesses that might be good for me to talk to do a similar customer discovery interview?
Um, Good question, and I think there probably are. And let's talk about it offline after the recording
Sounds good.
because I got to think about it anyway. So
Would it be helpful if I sent you a follow-up email with a little
yeah,
blurb that you could
yeah,
copy and paste
totally,
and forward, make
totally.
it
I'd be
easy for
happy to
you
do
to
that.
do the
Happy to
intros?
do. Yep, happy to
Awesome.
do it.
So what I'm building is Malloy's Militia to connect growth stage companies with talented and trustworthy independent contractors for staff augmentation and advisory services.
Hmm.
And so what that means is we're looking at companies that have 6 figures, they want to grow to 8 figures, and founders don't have the time to recruit, interview, vet, hire, and onboard full-time employees if they only need a copywriter for 10 hours a week. And finding people that they can trust, that have been vetted, that they know are going to deliver good, hopefully great quality work so that they can reach their business objectives and investor milestones. So that's what I'm building. And I've been doing a lot of work building up the supply side on the independent contractors, as a lot of folks, are either quitting their job or want to quit
Sure.
their job. They have a lot of skills. They don't necessarily want to sit in an office and be told what to do or where to be doing it for 40 hours a week. And so I'm trying to match those folks initially from my network, people I've got a relationship with or second connections that people will vouch for, with these companies that I'm doing customer discovery with. I think you are interview number 22, Shye. My goal is to get to 50 by the end of the quarter, and
Nice.
really understanding where are the needs in the market. And I think, you touched on a little bit with the bookkeeping and the cash flow management, like outsourced CFO. It's been a thing for decades.
Sure.
I'm trying to take that model and apply it to all the other business functions.
Hmm.
And I've seen a couple of patterns I'll share. I've seen marketing as a big need, whether it's copywriting, social media, content creation, video editing, graphic design. There's a lot of things there where folks don't need a full-time in-house person, or maybe they have like a CMO, but that person needs some folks doing some of the more manual labor
Delivery.
underneath of
Yeah.
them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then there's also a lot on the sales side. So whether it's outsourced SDRs for B2B products, like SDR being a sales development rep, somebody who's doing the emailing to schedule meetings with the founder to try to get a sales qualified lead that they know, hey, this person might need it. I found grant writing is another need with several companies. If
Oh, yeah. I could
that's
see
an
that.
option, different ways that they can access funding and it ties into that writing skill set, and then the strategy side as well. And so one of the things, and maybe I'll throw a question in there too. Um, what do you think the like of the different roles that we talked about, are that do you have a price point in mind for like what would be a reasonable hourly rate for some of those different roles? I'm realizing I should have asked about that a little earlier.
I don't. Well, I don't think that this really clouds my judgment. That
Yeah.
biases it in any way. I'm just, um, I think that general administrative at this stage of the game is probably are these, do you plan for them to be U.S. based, or does it matter?
Um, to start, they're US based. I do think there's a market for virtual assistants and things, but
Yeah. So
I think I'm
right.
looking
So if
at
you're, yeah.
US based.
Okay. So U.S. based, uh, on the administrative level is, probably $25 to $30 an hour is where it's going to start.
Yep.
And to get somebody competent U.S. based, you could probably get people to do it for cheaper, but
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
and I think that the boy, for professional services, it really runs the gamut, and I think that I've seen all kinds of different things. It seems like more of that is becoming almost like retainer based versus hourly based.
So my business model is to get clients on a retainer and for
Yeah,
them to be able to kind of mix and match who they need on a month to month basis, where we
yeah, I
have
think
different folks, and I'll pay the individuals an hourly rate, but they'll
right.
be ideally like a ten to $25,000 a month retainer. And then what do you need? We'll start you with these folks, and there's opportunities to cross sell or upsell, or hey, we
Yeah,
have
I mean,
different
if
folks.
you could basically provide like a lot of critical functions, with a mix of three or four people for $10,000 to $20,000 a month, um, you know, that would that would be a pretty amazing solution where someone basically has like a virtual team at their
Yeah.
disposal, and maybe some bench too. I don't know, so they're, that, which is even better than a full time person, because of course they need to do stuff.
Yep.
They so having a backup. So I think it's interesting. I mean, I think, look, I mean, I'm sure you're getting strong demand signals for this, right? So I guess what I would be thinking about in your seat is I would be curious about how that you're on your supply side. Why would someone work for you versus doing it by themselves? Just as completely freelancing. And yeah, so what does that value prop look like, for instance?
For sure. And the value prop is that people aren't good at business development and selling themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like most of the people I've talked to, like maybe they have a client or two, but they don't know where to generate the rest of the business. I've also talked to some people who are really uncomfortable in the selling themselves, but I
Uh,
know they're super smart and really talented. And so, giving them the opportunity to add value to these companies, earn additional income, and have fun too. I think one of the cultural values here is we're going to have fun and be relentlessly generous in how can we add value and make connections. And even if we can't do it, it's somebody else, we want to support them. So that's what I've seen on the supply side. And it's also like this is nobody's full-time job. Like I think militia
sure.
is a pretty good way of like you opt in if you've got the bandwidth, you're on the bench, and I'll show you too. Here you go, just a little sneak preview. My friend Airtable here, I've got different folks with different skills, and I had them. We've got business operations, marketing, finance, team, product expertise. This is kind of for me to know, okay, what are you good at? And I have one finance guy here. My goal is not to do technology, like it's not a developer
Sure.
thing. I think I can refer people to some of these bookkeeping firms, but those exist, and that's the other thing I guess I'll share that I've learned is there's a difference between individuals and businesses in this militia that I refer
Mm-hmm.
people to, and how we structure the contract, or some of it is sharing business back and forth versus having three individuals that all have at Malloy Industries emails, and we're going to meet weekly and divide and conquer what their needs are.
I mean, I can see that there's demand here. I'm sure that you're getting a strong demand signal. I just know, like you do from working with so many people in the space, that there is demand all the time. It's a
Yes.
big problem, um, and it's more and more people are going to have to work this way, and more companies are going to value the ability to do that. So I think that people that figure out the model and figure out how to differentiate and figure out how to manage the supply and keep people happy, I
Mhm.
don't think the problem is going to be acquiring customers. I really think my gut. I haven't done the discovery, but my gut
Yep.
tells me that the challenge is going to be managing the supply side effectively and making sure it's a strong value prop. But I like it. It's a big market. It's a huge market. So and there's a need for solutions. So I'm excited about it. I'm sure if you're doing it, it's going to be good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Shye, for your time today. I'll follow up with an email with some more info. And yeah, feel free to share this video with your students as well.
Yeah, send me a link so I can